A couple of weeks ago, I did a walking retreat, which was Buddhist. And talking to Nettie about it during study, she said, "Oh, this would make a great topic for one of our discussion groups." So the idea today is that I'll talk for 10 or 15 minutes about my experience, and then I'll offer a couple of prompts, I guess, and hopefully we'll talk for a little while, maybe altogether about half an hour or 40 minutes. Yeah. I guess the prompt that I'm heading towards is something like, what are the purpose of the forms in our session, or what makes a retreat, I suppose. So the retreat that I did was over the course of about 1 week. I think we spent about 8 days in total. We probably walked 75 kilometres altogether. It was a pretty mixed demographic, although there was young people were missing, but there wasn't many people in their 20-year-old age bracket or lower. But each day we would sort of get up, do a little bit of Tai Chi or yoga, seated meditation for half an hour, and then in sacred silence we would walk about 8 to 15 Ks. One day it was about 20, and we didn't have to carry all of our gear, but in the evenings we would have to set up our tents. And obviously, just like for sesshin, each day as well, there'd be a little bit of helping out to make sure that the retreat worked, probably a bit more than normal on sesshin. And so what's interesting, I suppose, is that despite a very different format, it had a similar sort of effect to me as sesshin. Of course, nothing's exactly the same as anything else, but meditation felt more concentrated on this retreat and was quite invigorated compared to how it would be for me on a typical morning sit during a week where I'm going to work. Which, really got me wondering, what is it about retreats? Why is the meditation so different on a retreat? Why can't I just sit down on a normal day and meditate like this? And since going, I've found this quote from Suzuki Roshi, which might have been one way that I could have explained what was going on. So Suzuki Roshi says, when we practice Zazen, we limit our activity to the smallest extent. Just keeping the right posture and being concentrated on sitting is how we express the universal nature. Then we become Buddha, and we express Buddha nature. So instead of having some object of worship, we just concentrate on the activity which we do in each moment. When you bow, you should just bow. When you sit, you should just sit. When you eat, you should just eat. If you do this, the universal nature is there. And then I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he says, we call this one act samadhi. So sort of to quickly summarize those differences between the walking retreat that I did and the Zen session. Obviously there was a lot less time sitting. I was maybe only about an hour a day for seated meditation. But there was a lot of encouragement to try to make the walking into a meditation of its own kind. And when you did sit, you were often sort of compared to, a very quiet and controlled setting like this, you would often be disturbed by environmental things like having a marsh fly land on you, or sort of the sun coming around and getting way too intense, or it suddenly starts storming. Also, there was a lot less rules on this retreat compared to our Zen session, and this was a pretty big deal for me. Took a bit of getting used to that. For example, the sacred silence during the walk. People would often still use hand signals and a lot of mime and body language and stuff. And I guess I'll relate one anecdote of something that happened, which was on one of the rest days. We did a seated session in the morning with a guided meditation, and it was very good, but it was such that having sat for an hour or so, everyone was quite tired, and the facilitators, the teachers, were onto this, and they said, okay, the next little period, we're going to give you maybe half an hour to do some moving meditation, and then come back and we'll commence some more sitting. And so for me, I was sort of like, yeah, I want to do some kinhin. And so I got up and I did, kinhin in the same form that we would do at sesshin. Walking very, very slowly around the circle where we'd been in our seated meditation. But of course, no one else there knew the kinhin form, so everyone else went off and did their own thing. And I couldn't help while doing my kinhin but be quite self-conscious. At first I was, just walking, but then, and just focusing on each footstep as it landed. But then I started, thinking about, is everyone else, just watching me walking really slow? I must look really weird. So there was less rules. And what I'm going to relate now, since coming back, I've done a bit of more reading, thinking about the forms and the roles of the forms and what sesshin is. And I'll read an excerpt now from Philip Kaplow, Roshi Philip Kaplow's book, The Three Pillars of Zen. This book was first published in 1965, when Zen was first kind of reaching the West. And people had started taking interest in Zen, but from a quite theoretical perspective, right? Kind of the Jack Kerouac, Gary Snyder, and people were interested in the philosophy, but Kaplow's sort of point was that people didn't understand it as a practice. So he produced this book, The Three Pillars of Zen, to try to broaden people's mind to other aspects that can't necessarily be easily written down or thought about by scholars. So, what Kaplow says about sesshin, I've cut this out of one of the chapters that he said that he had. What he says is, in a monastery, sesshin actually begins with certain ceremonies the evening before formal zazen begins. In the dimly lit zendo, which is to be the hub of all activities for 1 week, solemn head monks assemble the participants for the purpose of assigning places and instructing newcomers how to enter and leave the zendo unobtrusively, how to handle their utensils and bowls silently during meals, how to walk in kinhin, and how to get on and off their seating cushions quietly. With the conclusion of these formalities, everyone is summoned to the main hall, ablaze with lights, by the preponderous beats of the giant monastery drum, dressed in formal sitting attire. The participants line up in 2 rows facing each other across the hall, kneel in the traditional Japanese posture, and then bow to each other as a sign of mutual respect and identification with one another's aspiration. There is an air of suppressed excitement and hushed expectancy when, a few minutes later, the Roshi and his principal aides in full ceremonial dress enter. As they pass between the 2 ranks to take their seats at the head of the hall, all bow again, this time with heads touching the tatami mats out of deep respect for their teachers. And then after welcoming everyone, the Roshi gives a speech where he basically talks about the purpose of sesshin, and about the sacred silence and the importance of that. As part of it, he says, during sesshin, dispense with social amenities of every sort. Don't greet one another good morning or bid one another good night. Don't compliment or criticize each other. Further, you mustn't make a point of stepping aside to allow others to go ahead, nor should you push ahead of them. In all of your activities, you should move neither hastily nor sluggishly, but naturally, like flowing water. So I hope that in the stuff that I've presented so far, it's clear that when I was at this retreat, I was drawing a comparison between sesshin and the Yatra walking retreat. And of course, as Zen Buddhists, we should always be aware of drawing comparisons between 2 things, especially if you're idealizing sesshin as something special and saying that everything else is not something special. One more little quote from Suzuki Roshi that I think goes to this. He says, when you listen to a lecture, you should not have any idea of yourself. If you have some idea to compare with what is being said, you will not hear everything. Your understanding will be one-sided, and that is not naturalness. So on the retreat, I feel like I was comparing things to the sesshin, and wishing sort of that it would have this quite disciplined and structured approach, and really clinging to what we do in Zen with that quite carefully thought through and evolved container that brings us all together. But it was a different thing. And to go back to that story about when I was doing kinhin, I was quite self-conscious and trying to, just focus on my walking and being self-conscious. What actually ended up happening is one of the other participants, who was a Zen Buddhist, started doing kinhin in the opposite direction. And so we were walking very slowly together. And instead of being self-conscious for a moment, I was just noticing her kinhin as she slowly mirrored basically what I was doing, but in the opposite direction. And yeah, I think it was a sort of a moment for me to appreciate what the forms are, and how, I guess, in that retreat container, we all support each other's practice in a way. So yeah, that's about 15 minutes. If anyone's got more questions about the Yatra, I probably should have just shown some photos and stuff as well. But yeah, has anyone been on other different types of retreats with quite different forms, or has thoughts about the forms in sesshin?
I'm wondering, like, how you, when you talk about how you were sort of thinking about the forms and kind of, it seemed like you'd almost, like you missed those forms almost. Yeah.
Clinging to the forms.
But I'm also wondering, like when you went away from the retreat, like what kind of impact it had on you, like walking all day sounds quite beautiful. And yeah, so I was kind of wondering about that.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I'd say similar to other retreats, there's sort of some of the feeling of the retreat stays with you for a while after you come back. So as I said, I think after that experience where I realised I was clinging to the forms, I relaxed much more into what the retreat was, um, and was able to kind of make the most of it, I think, and really drop into using the walking and just getting quite relaxed in the walking. And yeah, I think that stayed with me afterwards as well, in much the same way as it would after sesshin. But it definitely invigorated my practice, right? In that, seeing how this contrast of different ways of doing things could sort of have these effects, I guess, that made me, what would you say, made me sit with a lot more intention for the next week or so, you know? Yeah, that's what I'd say.
And if I may ask another question, when you were walking, like the 15, 20K a day, did you find that you were like mentally meditating while you were walking?
Yeah. Thank you. Nettie, can you hear everything okay?
Yeah, we can hear really well.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I might have even kept a note in here that is sort of about that. Yeah, you hear, like I've read in some of the Zen texts, I'm not even sure where I'm pulling this from, but they say stuff like it has nothing whatsoever to do with sitting or lying down or walking or standing, right? Zazen should be able to be everything, and it shouldn't have anything to do with sitting or walking or standing or lying down. But regardless of the fact that we say it should be any activity, we practice it in sitting, right? And we do that for a reason. It's easier to drop into a real zazen when you've limited your activity to just sitting in the exact same posture that you sit in each time, right? And so it was hard to make the walking anything like the same. What actually happened is on like day 4 or 5 of the retreat, I feel like I'd been doing getting a bit mindful in the walking, but of course, while I was walking, I was thinking a lot. And I was also body surfing on my lunch breaks, which was really nice. I think that's something that sesshin could really do with, is yeah, the chance to go body surfing on your lunch break. I was being a bit mindful, but what I did towards the end, what happened is I found these glasses washed up on the beach, a pair of sunglasses that were like a really, really poor quality. They'd been like all scratched up and they had stuff stuck to them. And I started wearing those, and that like dimmed my vision a lot. And so I was just walking along with like quite foggy vision. And that really helped me to settle things down and get mindful. I guess it limited my mental activity a lot and got me to the point of just kind of left foot, left foot. And I was thinking a lot less about the beauty of the natural surroundings and like, wow, look at this amazing, lagoon, or the scenery was less distracting, I would say. Yeah. And I did end up getting to this point where the walking meditation, doing it for like 2 hours if you're just walking along a beach where you don't really need to be able to see much and you just kind of do it, and it's very rhythmic. Yeah, that did become very concentrated at one point. But yeah, in sesshin, all we're doing is sitting. Yeah. So I'd say yes, the walking. I was surprised that after I was able to kind of lean into it, the walking what did become quite a meditation, but at the same time, I sort of cheated a bit by wearing those sunglasses. Aids, meditation aids.
I am imagining that you weren't chatting very much, that it was a kind of noble silence. And that feels like that's very similar to what we do. Just, you're all together, you're all experiencing something similar, but you're not talking too much. So you're each feels like, I imagine you're each sort of having your own experience and supporting each other in that experience. So that it feels like it was very similar, and that was probably the most important common thread. It was not too much talking, and just a fairly simple structure of the day. Like in session, we've got a very fixed schedule, but still you're getting from the morning to the night doing these things, and you were walking from A to B each day, which was a comparable container.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like to think of it as that we just have different schools, and our school does it the way we do it at Seshin. And if you're more oriented towards sort of environmentalism, then that school does a lot more hiking and walking and sitting around fires, maybe. But really, they're all if the intention is the same, to sort of a connectedness, a mindful connectedness with things, then it's all the same in the end. Or certainly a lot of overlap.
Yeah. 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 I'm not sure whether this would be a useful way of thinking about it, but one thought I had about it was that there is a bit of a continuum in how much you can let go of the worldly activities as part of your retreat. I feel that on the yatra, it's not quite as extreme on that as the sesshin. Like in the sesshin, as we read in Philip Kaplow's description, like the recommendation is really to drop the social stuff to pretty much nothing. In the yatra, because of the practicalities of doing the walking, obviously you just can't go to that level. And there is a bit more responsibility on each person each day, obviously. So sort of on the continuum with just your regular daily life up here, where you've got all your responsibilities, and I don't even know what the other opposite extreme would be. where you've got absolutely no responsibilities whatsoever and none of your normal kind of daily activities. Sesshin allows you to drop quite a bit more off. But actually, yeah, what you also brought to mind, Nettie, something that I didn't mention is that the Yatra, the teachers leading it were from two different schools of Buddhism. One had been taught in insight meditation, and the other was Plum Village, but also with experience in Tibetan Buddhism. So it was sort of meant to be non-denominational amongst Buddhists, I guess. But it also included this concept of deep ecology, which was one of the real big highlights and one of the things that drew me to doing it. Deep ecology is the idea that it's quite deep emotional and spiritual causes to the environmental issues that we're facing in the world at the moment. And yeah, in the Yatra, this was basically there was a few ceremonies that we did where we would basically bring items that we found while we were walking during the day and sort of talk about the feelings that they bring up for us about the environment and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a really awesome part of it as well, was sort of reflecting on our relationship to nature. Yeah.
And another common thread that from what you're describing is a real attunement of one's senses. You know, in Sesshin, we're not interacting with the outside environment as much, but our senses become very attuned to the tiniest things. And then when we do go outside on our breaks, the natural world just seems so spectacular, and the sky is bright and the sounds are crisp. And
Yeah.
it feels that retreat, the Yatra retreat, is also helping people have their senses attuned to just, you know, the ordinary natural world in a similar way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thought that I had is thinking about the pilgrimage, the tradition of pilgrimages that we have in Buddhism and in Zen. And one of our own Sangha members, Tyson, has been on a long 2-month pilgrimage. So it has, there is the walking session kind of quality. We also have that in the Zen tradition.
Yeah. 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 That's very true, is that our sesshin is always held in a very beautiful natural setting. Yeah, and I can't remember what I was going to say. Tony.
Yeah, Bill, your experience going on different retreats reminded me when I first went on a retreat over in Western Australia with Arjun Brahm. Like, I turned up at the meditation hall and there were shoes. The shoes were not neatly lined up. They were all over the place, and there was a wave of panic that went through me, like, oh, sort of thing. But yeah, I got used to that. I think the thing about retreat is that the expression in Buddhism, or I suppose a line from Dogen, is to study Buddhism is to study yourself. To study yourself is to forget yourself and to be realized by the many things. And the other expression is to turn the light inward. And that, I think, and I'm reminded at Tassajara, the San Francisco Zen Centre's monastery come resort in summer and winter. They've got a swimming pool, and they had a guy out to look at the swimming pool. He said to them, "Oh, we can get some of those. Nowadays, we can just get an automatic vacuum, so your staff don't have to do that." And one of the senior staff members said, "No, we want to give our Zen students mindless tasks." So it's about turning the light inward, and so quietening things down and being less stimulated by the outside world takes many forms. Simply just not talking to people quietens things down, and that, and yeah, I suppose my experiences of various forms have their pluses and minuses, and the benefit you have from them comes with what sort of mindset, karma you bring to them, that you're born with, and then that's developed over time. And everything. So yeah, you just people respond to them differently. So. And the second question, where did you go, Bill?
Oh, true. It was held just south of Ballina, sort of, and north of Grafton, so on the north coast there, in Eureka National Park. Yeah, so it was a coast walk with a lot of beaches.
Not a very deep question, but did you go swimming?
Yeah, pretty much every day.
I just said you were body.
And how are the meals done with cooking and eating together?
Yeah, that was one of the highlights. They had one of Australia's foremost bush chefs holding things down. A guy who only ever knew him by the name of Tea Cozy, who was a bit of an eccentric character from one of the communes in Nimbin, apparently. And yeah, he would just pack up his kitchen each morning, which was, comprised a couple of gas stoves and a little awning tent or whatever, and move it to the next campsite and prepare 3 meals there for us. So yeah, it was like being the Tenzo, but on a whole nother level. Had to chase all the bush turkeys away as well as doing all the other duties. So that was pretty amazing. He's been doing that for 30 or 40 years as well, as part of this kind of emerging tradition.
And did you eat in silence, or how did the meals happen? What was the way it was done?
Towards the end, breakfast started to become a silent thing, but dinner was usually, with the socialization. And lunch would be packed lunch, and we would eat it in silence out in nature, which was pretty awesome. Yeah.
And did you walk alone, or is it kind of?
No, we all walk as a big group, and we wait on people as they're coming. And so yeah, it was 30 people, so it was a huge group to walk as, and they did an amazing job of managing that and keeping everyone as an actual cohesive group. But obviously we'd walk as a big group without talking. And it was interesting because you're walking down these beaches and through towns at times as well. So people would occasionally, you'd see people noticing us being like, oh, it's a bit unusual, like they're on the beach or whatever, just sort of saying hello to this group walking past, and people are just kind of like silently walking past. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, something I'd definitely recommend doing if you ever get the chance. But if you do, don't cling to the idea of it being exactly the same as sashimi.
Yeah, and then next week we've got a 1-day sit and at another beautiful place. Yeah, on the Murrumbidgee River.
Oh, I did have one other question actually, which is kind of the idea of, whatever activity we do in meditation, I feel like relating it to going down to Goomba and building a mud brick house or something, if we've got this continuum where the different things that we do are more or less like a retreat, I feel like going to Goomba is has this kind of quality as well. What would you say to that?
Absolutely, exactly. Yeah, that's sort of my vision, is that people can come down and it's a session, or kind of our zazen becomes everything we're doing in our life, and people can come and build a mud brick house with that same quality, or build a porch, or look after orchards and prune trees and water the garden and so on. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. It does feel like a mini session staying in Goongra.
All right. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
You're going to finish with 3 prostrations, Bill?
Yeah, let's do that. I didn't put out the chanting cards, so we won't do the chant. We didn't do the one to start either, but we'll do 3 prostrations, and then we'll just say an informal goodbye over there to the people online. Hey,
Fantastic.
and we'll do the bell like the Don normally does. Okay.